Please welcome Tobias Schimmer and Sumeet Shetty.
Thank you. How does the world's largest enterprise application software company bring out the best in its developers? Good evening, GitHub Universe. I'm Sumeet Shetty, Head of Tools India at SAP, and this is Dr. Tobias Schimmer, Head of Developer Experience, and we are here today at the 10th anniversary of GitHub Universe to tell you how GitHub Copilot is helping SAP reimagine developer experience. What we will share with you today is our point of view on what developer experience means at SAP. We'll take you through the inside story of our AI pair programming journey that's lasted over a year and a half. We'll share with you some key learnings from that journey. We will talk about the impact that GitHub Copilot has created at SAP and continues to create for us on a daily basis. And at the end of our session, we'll share with you some key takeaways. And who better to talk about developer experience than you, Tobias?
Thanks, Sumeet. Thanks for the warm introduction. Let me share a little bit about our relationship. We know each other for more than a decade, actually. And on a Saturday in April, end of April, Sumeet called me, and I thought he might call just to say hi and catch up or say happy birthday to my wife, Gabby. But it turned out to be he had this project in mind, evaluating GitHub Copilot, and he was asking me for some research support for that and to understand better how this resonates with people, what the impact is, and basically to make a better decision for SAP. And starting with that story, I want to shed a little bit of light on how we at SAP see developer experience. So we start with efficiency, right? Doing things right with the least friction possible, with the least waste in terms of lean is the obvious thing. But the other two parts of our so-called productivity equation are also effectiveness, which actually means, are we addressing the right markets? Are we talking to the right customers? And are we connecting or solving problems for the right end users, right? The other important part of this equation is creating a motivating and retaining a motivated team, the well-being, the satisfaction, if you want to call it, to give teams that kind of sense of purpose, to be happy, to be productive, to not to leave the company. The foundation of all of that is all the good practices you know about, you have been hearing about all day, you will hear about tomorrow, around DevOps capabilities according to DORA, Agile, Lean, all the good stuff. What do we actually do? What is our mission for developer experience? We deliberately put humans, and not a duck, in the center here to indicate that it's really important in such a big corporate, and I guess some of you can relate to that. Sometimes the fact that this is, at the end of the day, one person with a name, with an ID, with a certain problem to solve, with a certain set of tools, getting all those inputs, product standards, technology, company-specific technology, you name it, right? So we want to ensure that there is a perfect flow for the individual, for the team, and you can imagine SAP has 100,000 plus employees, so we rarely build one product with one team. So we also have to ensure that the value flow of entire product units, which could be 50 teams or more, is guaranteed. Feedback, talked about customers, also very important. Not only, and some of you might recognize the DevX framework here in the background, not only from a technical perspective, starting with unit tests, pipeline runs, but also actual customer feedback. Because in our field, it's really important to stay connected to the customers, to the end users, for reasons I will talk about just now. Cognitive load, again, same equation. There's a lot of technical cognitive load. We have SAP-specific frameworks, but a good portion of the cognitive load comes about by the domain knowledge our developers have to have in their minds, because we are building software for trade claims analysts that handle rebate agreements for some consumer product manufacturers, right? This is a job description or maybe an industry you have never heard of after you graduated from a CS school or so. So these are the main things we want to keep in mind. What is our vision and the strategy behind it? and the function developer experience is around for a year, starting with me 1 year ago, completely human-centered, really taking the perspective of this one developer with a certain problem to solve, with a name, with an identity. And my team, some people are here, my team is often complaining, hey, this is all this stuff, we cannot handle all of this. And I said, well, someone has to take it for the overall company, for the team, right? Because this is what our developers get on an everyday basis. The other thing, very important, data-driven. Data-driven basically has two aspects. Data about the product. So the developers on the team have to understand how is this product being adopted, what is the customer satisfaction, how are the usage patterns. The other piece of data is basically about the process. So I mentioned DORA earlier, so we measure the DORA 4. Obviously, we also look at flow metrics. So in general, we want to provide teams with a way of data-driven continuous process improvement. And guess what? The reason we are here, we also want to leverage the power of AI all along the software development lifecycle where it makes sense. So we could say that generative AI actually was for us the starting point to reimagine what developer experience is and will be at SAP.
So Tobias talked about the connection between generative artificial intelligence and developer experience at SAP. We think that generative artificial intelligence is central to developer experience, and for us, one of the most important, or even the #1 use case for enhancing developer experience at SAP using generative artificial intelligence is AI pair programming, which is programming with the support of an assistant powered by artificial intelligence. And when we made that decision that we want to reimagine developer experience powered by generative artificial intelligence, we went out there into the market and we looked at all of the AI pair programming tools which were available. And that was an interesting journey. So you will see a list of strong contenders here. All of them, I think, strong contenders. There was GitHub Copilot, there was Safurai, there was Tab9, Codium, Ghostwriter. We looked at Gemini Code Assist. We looked at QDeveloper, CodeGPT, Cody, and Cursor. And the actual list of tools we looked at is much larger, but these are the tools that made it to the short list. And we put each of these tools through an evaluation. And how did we evaluate? Before going and looking at all of these tools in the market, we came up with a list of desired capabilities. We sat down and put together a list of the desired capabilities of an ideal AI pair programming tool. And that allowed us to evaluate for our needs each of these tools. Our evaluation led us to the conclusion that for our needs, for SAP's needs, GitHub Copilot was our AI pair programming tool of choice. How is Copilot enhancing our developer experience? What you see here is closely related to the list of capabilities that we defined in an ideal AI pair programming tool. So if you look at a developer and you talk to him or her about an ideal AI pair programming tool, the developer would say, at its very basic, the AI pair programming tool has to provide intelligent autocomplete suggestions as you code. The developer would also expect the ability to generate code from scratch using prompts in a natural language of your choice, and of course the ability to generate unit tests to enhance your test coverage. That's the basic set of capabilities that you might expect from an AI pair programming tool. We went a little beyond that and said what we would like also is the ability for our developers to get support from an AI pair programming tool to find bugs, fix bugs, review code, not only your own code, but also the code of your colleagues. We went further and said, what if the AI pair programming tool could also refactor code, translate code from one programming language to another, have the ability to generate developer documentation, and answer questions across multiple programming languages, all in the comfort of your code editor. And the reason we went for GitHub Copilot and the way in which Copilot is enhancing our developer experiences, Copilot brings all of these capabilities to our developers today out of the box. And that's a huge value proposition for a developer to have all of these capabilities available in one AI pair programming tool across multiple programming languages, across multiple code editors. I talked about the year-and-a-half-long journey of AI pair programming at SAP, and that began with that evaluation of AI pair programming tools in March of 2023. After evaluating the tools, we started working with different corporate functions. We started talking to our AI ethics team, colleagues in SAP Legal, Data Protection and Privacy, Product Security, Procurement, Software Asset Management, Corporate Processes in IT, and where required also with our social partners, including the Works Council. Once we got a green flag from each of these colleagues, we were able to go through to the next step. And we did this due diligence with rigor, but we did it in record time. We did that in a very short period of time. And we took the approach that we'd like to test what it means to have an AI pair programming tool at SAP. So we took the approach of having pilot users, a group of 500 pilot users in our organization who we called early adopters. We gave them access to Copilot for a period of 3 months. And during that period of 3 months, we collected a lot of data. We collected data from systems. We collected data from the developers. We analyzed that data, drew insights out of that, made some recommendations to our sponsors, and we got a decision from them. And that decision was, the data that you collected looks great. Go ahead and roll out GitHub Copilot across the length and breadth of SAP. And we started the journey, the rollout, in November of 2023. If you spoke to Tobias and me in October of 2023, we had 500 early adopters using GitHub Copilot at SAP. The rollout started in November, and I'll take you through what that journey looked like in a moment. Before I hand over to Tobias, one of the things that was super important to us throughout this entire journey, especially gathering data through systems, through people, was the whole element of human centricity.
Yeah. So I might sound like a broken record, and hopefully this comes natural to you. You say, yeah, let's tick that box at our company. But it was really important for us to, as you can read here, and I really love this quote from a recent Google paper, in a field where behavior is often measured by technology, as in tool data, it's important to remember that behind the signals we use to create software development productivity metrics, there are humans at work. And we sometimes, when we show these dashboards, we tend to forget that. So what is our actual research strategy? I think Sumeet already revealed most of it, but let's dive into it a little bit. We obviously used the telemetry data that we got from GitHub on GitHub Copilot, but we enriched it also with a really comprehensive set of questions in a survey to get experience data from our developers to really see how they perceive productivity, how they perceive ease of use, how is their willingness and also their willingness to promote the thing to their colleagues. Does it actually work at SAP? And now, how did we gather that experience data? We started with a welcome survey to basically understand who are we dealing with, right? Who are these 500-something people? What is their tenure? In which locations are they? Which tools are they using? Which technology? Which IDEs? And so on and so forth. And from there on, over those 3 months, we started to do it regular, as in 2 weekly check-ins, to understand which exact use cases are they trying to achieve with GitHub Copilot, and what works well and what doesn't work well. And we obviously played it also back to our friends at GitHub. After the 3 months, we took a pretty comprehensive survey, and we'll come to the details. Just bear with us for a second. And we also took the time, after a couple of weeks, to do a closing survey, asking about things we got curious about, we heard, in the industry. And again, bear with us. We'll come to that. So did we do this alone? No. I mean, I got a PhD in software engineering, and we have a couple of smart people around us. We deliberately chose to work with research partners, like the Hasso-Plattner Institute in Potsdam, Germany, which is close to Berlin. Hasso-Plattner, as in one of the SAP founders also. We also work with University of California in Irvine because they have the leading researchers in software engineering and human-computer interaction with development tools in their faculty, and there will be new faculty joining from Microsoft Research and also CMU very soon. We also do work with the University of Mannheim. So if you check my LinkedIn, not because I graduated there primarily, but also because we also have a lot of talent there. We hired one person as a staff researcher who does nothing else as with Copilot and other development tools to do such studies, to better understand, to better serve our people essentially. And we work with a whole bunch of other universities, among those the Technical University of Munich, for instance, where we look at a broader scale of AI use cases along the software development lifecycle.
What did we find out in all the data that we collected and all the research activities that we gathered? The 500 early adopters of GitHub Copilot told us that Copilot was easy to use, that it was successfully able to draw context from their prompts and from their code, that it made our developers feel more productive, a metric we call perceived productivity. They also told us that Copilot increased the time that they had for value-adding tasks and made software development not only easier, but also faster. They were able to write more code, deliver more product features. They were able to reduce the effort for repetitive tasks. We asked the 500 early adopters, do you want to continue using GitHub Copilot at the end of the early adoption period? 87% of them said they wanted to continue using Copilot. We had another opportunity to augment this research, and that was when Copilot Chat was introduced. And Chat brought in an additional set of capabilities to GitHub Copilot. Very exciting time for us. We used that opportunity to do another survey. But before that, here's a key summary of what we learned from the early adoption. 93% of our developers said Copilot was easy to use. 84% said it made their software development faster. 81% felt more productive. 88% said time for repetitive tasks has gone down. And of course, 87% wanted to continue using it. When Chat was introduced, we got a step up in most of these numbers. And 84% of our developers said they were able to learn from the suggestions provided by GitHub Copilot. 78% said, hey, I can write more code. 80% said, we feel more productive. 71% said, I can not only write more code, but also write code with better quality. And the percentage of people who wanted to continue using GitHub Copilot went up from 87 to 93%. That was a pleasant outcome for us. We didn't rest here. We started rolling out Copilot across SAP. We had about 10,000 people using Copilot. We did another round of research at scale, and here's what we learned. Most of the numbers that we gathered during the early adoption with 500 developers were confirmed by our larger survey with around 10,000 developers. And that was a huge vindication of our strategy to go with GitHub Copilot. 93% said Copilot was easy to use. 81% agreed that it made software development faster. 79% felt more productive. 85% said, hey, repetitive tasks get faster. At scale, with around 10,000 developers, 88%. And remember, these are people who use multiple programming languages, technology stacks, code editors. 88% still said, we would love to continue using Copilot.
Yeah. So I get it. There was a lot of numbers, and those 3 slides looked all the same by design. So let me summarize this a little bit. I talked earlier about the 3 surprises we had, or the 3 sets of surprising insights. The first one was that we kind of challenged the value proposition of GitHub Copilot. There was research with Microsoft Research. We said, let's just do the same survey with our folks. And we got the same numbers, if not better. That was the first surprise. And the second surprise was when we introduced GitHub Copilot Chat after a while, in somewhat June, July, that even this gave us even a step change up. You saw the numbers about the learning, about the willingness to proceed using GitHub Copilot, which By the way, Sumeet didn't mention that, translated to an NPS, Net Promoter Score of 77, which is pretty unheard of. 100 is the max, if you know the scale. And last but not least, we said, yeah, right, this was the enthusiasts, the early adopters, right? If we do this at scale out of a set of 10,000 people, we saw the very same numbers, again, if not better, and the 88% here that are willing to continue translates still to a Net Promoter Score of 66, which is pretty fine. But it didn't stop there. Actually, I mentioned earlier that we did this additional closing survey with questions we had in mind. So we were asking ourselves, okay, if developers are more productive, how are they using their time? How are they reinvesting it? Got some interesting numbers here. I mean, to the left or to your left, the obvious ones, more features, more time for learning. But if you do the math, 40% of this adds up to things related to tackling technical debt. And this is actually where we virtually opened a bottle of champagne, because in our annual developer experience surveys, technical debt is always on top when we ask people, what is your top, in air quotes, productivity blocker at daily work? So this was already a great revelation. And the other question, among many we had in mind, was, hey, how do people, this is not our opinion, how do people kind of project the culture, the cultural changes when introducing AI pair programming with GitHub Copilot? So you see things like enhancing the developer experience as a whole, enhancing productivity, right? Perceived productivity was high, enhanced code quality while producing more code, which is also a big thing. The learning aspect we have already mentioned, and also in general that being able to focus on creative and value-adding work, which has a strong relationship to being happy and the well-being aspect that we introduced earlier. On the other side, we also wanted to, know the inconvenient truth, what could change for the worse. And as you see here, obviously over-reliance on AI-generated code. So there are similar studies in, real pilots using computer systems and their skills being deteriorated, decrease in the programming skills, but also code review skills as such. Maybe, again, just prognosis, maybe also less motivation to learn new languages and technologies from the ground up. And last but not least, also potentially a decrease in actually human-to-human pair programming as it was intended by extreme programming. So, again, the human-centered aspect. These are real people. Fabian Haller here is not an AI artifact. He is hopefully watching now, back in Newport Beach. He basically gave us the quote that Copilot makes it easier to be a full-stack developer, proficient in multiple languages. Fabian being a person with a strong data science background and Python, but now being able to basically work on all parts of the product. Another guy, again, real person, I'm here, said straight out, no turbulence, so he likes the Copilot metaphor, only smooth and fast coding with Copilot. So he's using Java, and he's really super happy. It took me like 5 minutes to get a picture and a quote from him when we did that. And Sumeet, do we have some more?
Absolutely. Surabhi Brahma is a talented Java developer located at SAP in Bangalore, and she's an expert with Java, and she loves using GitHub Copilot for 2 reasons. In a language where she's an expert, she's still able to get value out of Copilot in that it intelligently completes her code, has the ability to generate code from scratch, generate unit tests, find and fix bugs for her. She loves using Copilot with Java. At the same time, she had a project which required her to work with Go. Now, Go was a new programming language to her. She was unfamiliar with Go. And when she spoke to us, she said she was astonished by how easily she was able to get started with Go. So I love that she says that GitHub Copilot chat is magical with Go and Java. And magical is not a word that you hear too often in the context of software. So love that Surabhi is experiencing the full power of GitHub Copilot, including chat. We also spoke with Maximilian Techritz, who's located in Berlin. He works with Kubernetes and Go. What he had to tell us was that GitHub Copilot was helping him develop cloud-native applications better and faster. And he shares one thing with Surabhi. He loves using Copilot with Go because it was also a programming language that he was unfamiliar with, and it significantly lowered his entry barrier to getting started with this new and unfamiliar programming language to him. Where are we today? As I said, October of last year, 500 early adopters at SAP. Today, we have over 18,000 developers onboarded to GitHub Copilot.
I think it's worth a real fist bump here.
Moment of celebration for us. We took an approach to this global rollout, and that approach was to do it in phases. So as I said before, October of 2023, 500 developers. By the end of that year, just before the Christmas break, we had onboarded about 3,000 developers. We took this approach to do the rollout in phases so that we could learn from each phase of the rollout and apply those learnings in the next phase. And that served us pretty well. Since January 2024, we've been scaling rapidly. We started with 5,000 people in January. And in September of 2024, we reached our target of 18,000 developers at SAP. There are many advantages to scaling in phases. It gives you a lot of options. It gives you time to reflect on what went well, what did not go well. And it also enables your teams to regroup and react to the feedback from the previous rounds. Those were the steps, the number of developers that we added at each phase of the rollout. What's the measurable impact that GitHub Copilot is creating at SAP? In the period between January and September 2024, GitHub Copilot has provided 23.6 million AI-powered suggestions to developers at SAP. Our developers have accepted 6 million of those suggestions, and 9.3 million lines of code have been accepted and have made their way into SAP products and solutions. And this translates into a code acceptance rate, which is the ratio of suggestions accepted to suggestions provided. We have an average code acceptance rate of 25.6% across that entire time period. And what Tobias and I do is we not only look at these numbers in aggregates, we also look at trends. So we'd like to share with you some of those trends. When we looked at suggestions provided versus suggestions accepted over a period of time, this is what the graph is looking like. As we were adding developers, the number of suggestions provided consistently increased, and the number of suggestions accepted by those developers also had a significant increase. If you look at the numbers in January, we were having about 1 million suggestions provided across that entire month. And if you look at August, we had an all-time high of about 3.5 million suggestions in just 1 month. We're also looking at trends related to lines of code accepted. When we started off, we had about 300 to 350,000 lines of code accepted in the month of January. Where we are today, in August and September, you can see that that number is between 1 to 1.25 million. So the scaling of GitHub Copilot at SAP has been successful, not only in terms of the suggestions that have been provided, also the suggestions that have been accepted, and the lines of code that have been accepted. There's a story behind the code acceptance rate. So when we started using Copilot at SAP, the code acceptance rate hovered between the 20 to the 22% mark for the first few months. We saw chat as an opportunity to take that up further, and we were curious what would happen after chat was introduced. We saw an immediate uptick. It went to around the 24% mark. And if you look at the last 3 months, we've had an average code acceptance rate of around 30%, which is huge in terms of the value proposition for our developers. not only do we provide a powerful AI pair programming tool to our developers, we also help them onboard to this powerful AI pair programming tool by providing multiple resources. The centerpiece of our onboarding strategy is our GitHub Copilot SharePoint, where you get an overview of what Copilot really is. There are frequently asked questions which are answered so that you don't need to wait for an expert. You have detailed instructions on how to set up Copilot, how to use Copilot, and our colleagues in legal, data protection and privacy, product security have defined certain do's and don'ts for our developers to responsibly use GitHub Copilot at SAP. So we've got the SharePoint. We also have a space for people to share and collaborate. So we've got a GitHub Copilot community where Copilot users at SAP can have conversations and connections and share their experiences. If you need support while using Copilot, we've got a Q&A channel where you post a question and you get answer to any question about using GitHub Copilot from our community of experts, both within SAP and with support from our colleagues in GitHub. In the last months, we added another onboarding resource. We created a series of expert talks. So we bring every month an expert in the field of AI pair programming and GitHub Copilot talking about one facet or one topic related to AI pair programming. Each of these resources have been hugely successful. Our SharePoint has been viewed over 115,000 times. Our channels, the community and the Q&A channel, both have more than 18,000 members each. And in just a few months, our expert talks have had more than 10,000 participants. We learned a lot of lessons along this 1.5-year journey. And that started in a very unusual way, where I contacted a colleague from Bayer, located in Leverkusen, and I reached him on LinkedIn and I said, hey, I know you're implementing Copilot at Bayer, could I ask you a question? That colleague, Tim Meinersagen, is at Universe this year, and he sent me a reply from his vacation and connected me with another colleague. So we are now paying that kindness forward by sharing our learnings with our customers, with our partners, which includes, of course, our friends at Bayer, but also Daimler Truck, Bosch, Roche, Deutsche Telekom, and BASF, among others. And if you'd like to be on that list, and if you'd like to set up a session where we share our learnings with you, please get in touch with us at the end of the session.
Don't have to be a company based out of Germany.
An important moment in our adoption of GitHub Copilot was when we reached 18,000 developers onboarded. I would say another moment was when Gartner released their first ever Magic Quadrant for AI assistants, and they rated GitHub as a leader on that Magic Quadrant. This was an important moment for us because it validated all of the research that we put into GitHub Copilot and the decision or the bet that we made at SAP to roll out Copilot at scale.
If you don't find the GitHub bubble on that chart, it's in the very upper right.
To summarize key takeaways from our journey, SAP, the world's largest provider of enterprise application software, rolled out AI pair programming with GitHub Copilot to over 18,000 developers with 3 key qualities: speed, efficiency, and security. And that was really important to us. The second element that we'd like to share with you is that adoption of GitHub Copilot at SAP helped to create trust in the ease of use and in the output of generative artificial intelligence.
Yeah, and not only trust as a user of generative AI, SAP as a company is also building products leveraging generative AI. So it helped us also gain some empathy for, how are the corporate users feeling when they use our software. For developer experience, did I mention a human-centered aspect? Definitely our research indicates that GitHub Copilot is significantly and even statistically significantly enhancing developer experience at SAP, and was really the highlight of the last year and helped us to start reimagining what developer experience is and will be at SAP.
One of our favorite quotes about GitHub Copilot comes from the CEO of GitHub, Thomas Damke. He joined the kickoff meeting for the early adoption of GitHub Copilot at SAP. And during that meeting, he said something which has stuck with us, and it's our favorite quote about Copilot. Thomas said, GitHub Copilot brings fun, creativity, and flow back into programming. That's what we experienced. That's what our teams are telling us, and that's what we uncovered through our research. So big thank you to Thomas and the leadership team and all our colleagues at GitHub for supporting us on this journey. A big thank you also to the GitHub Copilot adoption team at SAP for taking 500 developers at SAP through that early adoption process and then guiding us through to over 18,000 developers onboarded at SAP. We're very proud to be here this year at the 10th anniversary of GitHub Universe to be sharing our story of AI pair programming with GitHub Copilot and how GitHub Copilot is helping SAP to reimagine the developer experience. I'm Sumeet Shetty. This is Dr. Tobias Schimmer. If you'd like to get in touch with us, send us a message on LinkedIn or any other platform, and we'd be happy to share additional details. We'll be around in the speakers area at the end of this session, and we'd appreciate it if you could take a moment and provide feedback for the session. You've been a terrific audience. Thank you so much, and what an honor to be here at GitHub Universe. Thank you.